Well, hey, family, good to be back with you again. We're just going to continue to dive in as we just study Wrecking the Roof, trying to figure out how do we get people that are far from Jesus to his feet? Because again, we know what happens when we get people to the feet of Jesus. And so we're just going to dive right in, Mark chapter 1, verse 21, and let's just see where the text takes us, all right? It says this, they went to Capernaum, which is the place where Jesus was living at the time. As a matter of fact, the disciples were there as well. That was their hometown. So they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and just began to teach. And here's what happened. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. So real fast, aren't you glad? I know that I'm glad. Aren't you glad that Jesus wasn't just a fitness coach, a life coach, like one of those Peloton people that yell at you and just tell you lots of nice things, but that when Jesus speaks, family, when Jesus speaks, his words have weight. People realize that what he's saying is true in my soul, right? So he taught with authority. They could feel that. And as they're sitting there, one of the things, if you have an opportunity to read through, they find out that there is a demoniac right there in the synagogue. There's a demoniac, somebody with some real darkness right there in the church. I know that seems crazy that there would be a real darkness, not just outside the church, but in the church, but it was true then and it's true now. And aren't you glad that Jesus deals not just with light things, but he deals with dark things too. Verse 27 says it like this. It says, the people were all so amazed that they ask each other, what is this? A new teaching and with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey him. And so he casts a demon out of this guy, and because of that, verse 28 says, news about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Verse 29, as soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Literally, I've been there in Capernaum. You can still see the outline of where that first century synagogue was. And maybe like from me to, maybe 50 feet from the door is what they believe to be Simon Peter's home, likely where his mother-in-law was. And so you can literally go there and visit today. So it's literally right outside the door, but they leave the synagogue where Jesus deals with this really dark thing, and he walks into Simon's home, just going to the home of his friend, and now he's going to deal with sickness. It says Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So, Jesus, he went to her, verse 31, took her hand and helped her up, and the fever left her, and she began to wait on them. And so, right off the bat, I just want to say a couple things. I think that you know them, but let me just say them, and then we're going to keep pushing forward. It is one thing to have a heart and mind to just help people far from Jesus, but you and I both know that when we're talking about people far from Jesus, we're talking about some stuff that is real and is dark. And I just want to remind us today that yes, Jesus has the power over all of that. He has the power over all of that. Every darkness kneels at the feet of Jesus. Aren't you glad? So I just want to remind you, there's no darkness you're going to step into in somebody's life that Jesus doesn't have authority over. I'm grateful for that. But not only are you going to step into dark things, we're going to step into people's lives where maybe they've been chained with some darkness even. But sometimes we walk in and people need some real healing. They need physical healing. They need spiritual healing. They need healing of their soul, healing from the past. And I love what Malachi says in prophecy about Jesus coming. It says the Savior will rise with healing in his wings. And I just want to remind you, Jesus isn't inviting you into places and spaces that he doesn't have power over. When you step into the lives of people that need real healing, I want to remind you, this text wants to remind you that he's got healing in his wings. And so we just keep going. So he's driving out demons, he's healing sick. And so here's the result, verse 32. That evening, after sunset, the people just brought to Jesus. They're like, we're just going to bring you all the sick and demon possessed. We're like, if that's what you do, then they just start packing the house. It says, verse 33, the whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus just healed many who just had various diseases, all kinds of different stuff. And he also drove out many demons. And he wouldn't even let the demons speak because they knew who he was. And so I just wanted you to have this picture. Do you have this picture in your mind where Jesus is showing up and people are starting to see that this Jesus has power, this Jesus has authority, has a weight, he's got power over the darkness, he's got power over sickness and all the things that keep us back. And now the whole town is gathered at the door. The place is packed. Now, what's that have to do with you? If you're gonna have a heart to help people far from Jesus, and you're gonna do anything that you can to get them to the feet of Jesus, and you're gonna, then here's the thing, you're gonna have to have a heart to meet people in their darkness and their sickness. Now here's the deal. The moment you start doing that, and I remember when Jesus started inviting us into just people's darkness and sickness and just saying, hey, look, Matt, Sarah, kids, like our Reagan family, we want to invite you in. I want you to see people the way that I see people. But as soon as we start seeing this, we recognize that we're not just dealing with kind of nice people that need a couple morals change. We're dealing with real darkness. We're dealing with real sickness. And the beautiful thing is that God started changing people. We just started praying, right? We just started leaning in. But God just started praying, changing people's lives. And it was more beautiful than you can imagine. And then, and I just want to say this, and then it started feeling like total chaos. I mean, here's the deal. When you start stepping into people's lives, your life just might end up more packed and more chaotic than you ever dreamed. And so if you're really gonna have a heart to take people who don't know Jesus to the feet of Jesus, then I just want you to know, when you step out and when you start, we're really praying that you will, when you start leaning into those places and spaces, inviting that way of lifestyle into your life, then you are going to have a life that is really packed, a little chaotic, and your plans are going to get changed. And so why do I say that? Because this can be a real sticking point for people. Why? Because there's a lot of people in groups like yours and in church services, and they hear, man, Jesus wants you to make a difference, and you kind of idealize it and you dream it, and you're like, man, I want to go save those people, which be careful. We're called to love those people. Jesus will do the saving. But I'm going to do it. It's going to be great. And I'm going to keep my perfect yard and my perfect house and never change a vacation and keep all of my financial plans the same. And I'm just here to tell you, that's not how it works, man. Like when we decide to step into people's lives, when you start carrying the hope of Jesus into people's lives, I'm just telling you, Romans 8:19 says like this, creation waits with eager anticipation for the sons and daughters of God to be revealed. There's a world waiting for someone to bring that kind of authority and hope and healing and to deal with the darkness that everybody else wants to run from. And when you start doing that, your life is going to be a little more complicated maybe than you thought. So here's the thing, I do funerals all the time. As a matter of fact, I just did one of the sweetest funerals for a special needs family that I've ever done. I think there were like 35 wheelchairs just out in the group, and I'm just telling you, it was the sweetest thing. And a lot of people ask me, what's the difference? Because when you do funerals, you really get to celebrate somebody's life as a whole. And I've just come to find this really interesting thing, right? Like there are some funerals that I do, and they're sweet people and they're loving people, and people will get up in front of everybody, and it's usually a small group of people. I'm not judging. It's usually a small group of people, and you'll just hear, he really kept a really nice yard. Man, his house was always impeccable, and man, he just had everything kind of a certain way, and he didn't, he wasn't crazy about people, but he liked people, just wasn't, and then there's another kind of funeral. And those kind of funerals are the celebration of people's lives where I just hear, literally I've been a part of so many of them, where you just hear person after person after person just say, I remember showing up on their doorstep, and I remember calling them at 3 p.m. or 2 o'clock at night, and I remember when they stopped and dropped what they were doing and they came. I remember when they gave. I remember when they sacrificed. I remember when they showed up. I remember when, and all of a sudden you start hearing these stories of people that just give their lives away to people. And guess what? That sounds really ideal. It's complicated, man. Like, it's complicated to just live a life where there might be somebody at the door and there might be a new person with a need, and you may not be able to spend the money on what you thought you're going to spend on, and you might end up with a house full of teenagers that are a little rough around the edges, and you might end up with some scratches on your floor, some dents and holes in the wall, not that I know that one, in a yard that gets parked in when it's not supposed to be parked in. And I'm just saying, that's where the beauty begins. Because when you really start stepping in with the Jesus that you and I have come to know, with the weight of what he carries to change and to alter and to shift people's lives, to step into dark places that nobody else will touch, and he will do things nobody can do. And when you start to watch him heal people and deliver people, then I'm just telling you, it's the most beautiful thing ever. And don't be surprised, and welcome it like the greatest gift ever when your life gets a little complicated. My prayer is that your life will start getting really complicated, but really beautiful. Step in. It's the way of Jesus.